this panel because in a chance to talk to independent publishers, I think we're getting an opportunity to do something we don't do enough of. I'm finding that there's an awful lot of coverage in media, and I'm afraid I can only blame myself for this as well as a lot of my colleagues, that tends to treat independent publishing as flyover country. We kind of think, well, the authors are either going to be self-publishers, God bless them, or they're going to a big five. And it's like that strange period in the center here that we're ignoring. And there's a wonderful sea of marvelous, competitive, advantageous material being presented and produced and generated and even archived for us by the independent publishers all over the country and in many parts of the world that I think we're not giving enough attention to, and I think actually that sector is probably going to be coming on strong in coming years as digital takes hold and as we move deeper and deeper into the reality of what that means. So let me tell you quickly who we have to talk with us today, and then we'll get started. I'll start closest to me and move out across the Javitzian plane here as we go farther down the table there. Jason Allen Ashlock is with us. He is with a very interesting outfit called Thought Catalog Books. And then next to him is Scott Waxman of Diversion Books. Next to him is Jessica Case of Pegusus Books. And then finally on the table is Bronwyn Ruska, who's publisher with the venerable Soho Press. And in going to each of these publishers, I first had in my mind what I thought were distinguishing elements. For example, Soho Press is family founded. Diversion Books was generated out of the work of an agency. Thought Catalog is a magazine online, specifically geared toward millennials, a very active one and a huge one, with some 33 million readers per month. It's buying with the New York Times. And so it comes into book publishing from a completely different angle. And Pegusus Books is bigger than many people realize. There's many as 100 titles a year being turned by this company. But those are my concepts. So as a journalist, that's how I look at these publishers. And the first thing I started by wanting to ask these folks is what do they see as the defining characteristics and what I think will be revealed as the diversity of their different companies. So Jason, let's start with you. Talk to us a little bit about Thought Catalog Books.
First of all, thanks for inviting me to the panel.
My pleasure. Thanks.
This is Scott and I's fourth panel together for the past 6 months. Well, maybe I should start with talking about Thought Catalog as a digital magazine and then downshifted it to Thought Catalog Books. Thought Catalog as a website was founded in 2010, really by a group of writers looking for a new place to publish their work. A small little sort of literary zine, I guess you could call it. Over the past few years, it's become much more than that. Known as sort of a machine that produces viral content. So in any given month, we'll have between 25 and 35 million unique readers. As Porter said, often vying with the New York Times for rankings of top websites in the United States. We're regularly in the top 50. And the book publishing program was born out of that. So it was started by a web-first group of publishers that didn't think about books as a separate ghetto or separate category, but thought about books as a way to attract audience or to improve loyalty or to solidify relationships with a reader that was coming back frequently to their site. So the books were never given away, they were always sold, but their main purpose wasn't necessarily to drive revenue, it was to increase someone's loyalty to the site and identification with a particular author that he or she was enjoying. So now we see the site that a lot of people are coming to the site not from the homepage or not even from the social traffic, but from individual author pages within the site, which is a signal that there's some loyalty developing there, and that's what books are meant to foster. So our distinguishing characteristic is probably the philosophical distance between Thought Catalog Books and more traditional publishing players. Not because there was any intent to be different, but just because it was born in a very different environment. And that lives itself out in a variety of ways. I think, for instance, Thought Catalog doesn't think a whole lot about launch. If a book is ready, the book is put out, and then we wait for the right viral content in which we can drop book ads or make a reader aware of the book that we published. We don't think a lot about protracted timelines. We don't think a lot about retail environments. Most of the books that we sell, we drive the sales of through our platform. So it's a lot of digitally owned marketing that doesn't require allegiance to or relationship with many traditional publishing partners. And really, to date, there's been this kind of porous relationship between Thought Catalog Books and the rest of Thought Catalog, and that Many of the writers for the site are also published authors with our imprint. Of course, the books are pushed regularly and cycled through the viral content of the site. And we really haven't gone out until the last couple of months. We haven't really gone out seeking a lot of additional authors. We just took our first meetings with agents over the spring. So there has been this kind of distance, and now over the past year, we published, I think, 130, 140 titles, sold 220,000 copies of those titles. And there's a sense that we sort of have built up a kind of machine, like we sort of know what we're doing, and so it's time to maybe become a little bit more traditional and go after the bigger titles by the bigger authors.
And I imagine on the non-traditional side where you started, a lot of the magazine writers who then put out a book see this as enhancing their brand, right? They're actually working both sides in order to move it forward. Fit to purpose in that sense. The thing was set up that way. Scott Waxman from Diversion Books said, in terms of being fit to purpose, your creation of Diversion was very much an answer to a need, right?
Answer to
a need.
A need. Yeah. Well, I mean, the philosophy behind Diversion really was always digital first.
And you were early to this. Sorry to jump in.
Yeah, the company's 4 years old. Every title we publish we focus on the digital format, both from a production and marketing standpoint. We have about 500 titles, backlist and front list. We're really publishing for power readers. Our goal is to find great reads for people who read a lot of books. And so we are looking in genre categories of romance, really heavy in romance, also mystery, thriller, suspense, and science fiction. We have a sort of program of marketing that we do for every title. We've kind of put together a series of things that we do for every single book. If it's a backlist series that we're bringing back out, and we'll follow a certain amount of focus on covers and trying to create a look between those, and then really work hard on the metadata and the various ways that we get books discovered. But we are looking for authors who had some traction already. But on the front list side, we're taking chances on new voices, and we're cross-promoting those with some of our more established authors. So we are excited about front list. I think that's one of the distinguishing characteristics for us in digital publishers, is that we really are excited about front list and buoy that with our backlist. We are also interested in trying to examine different kinds of categories, maybe even in the public domain down the road. We have a new series coming to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the Civil War. We're excited about where we rediscovered lost classics of books that were written right after the Civil War. We're going to launch those this summer and then roll out another 50 titles. 2020 this summer, another 50 titles between now and the anniversary next April. So it's really a curation. I mean, it has a traditional approach. You curate our books with a digital focus on the marketing and production. So I think it's an interesting mix that separates us a little bit.
And big. I mean, that sounds like a lot of output, actually, particularly on the Civil War program. Right?
Well, I think so. I mean, I do think scale is important for digital, and even on the front list end, we're not often releasing one book at a time by an author. If we can, there's at least a couple other books in the offing by that author. I think it's important for discoverability and scale to publish a lot of titles, and we have built up a marketing system that is efficient, and we can really cover our bases and feel like we're adding a lot of value to the authors because we know how easy it is for them to self-publish. And what we're really trying to do is give them that benefit of the royalty, the high royalty, with this level of focus on marketing and production to give them, just great value back.
That's terrific. Thanks. Jessica Case of Pegusus Books. I find this a fascinating house, and I'm so glad you're here today. Tell us, what was the initial idea in founding Pegusus?
So when Piper Hancock, who is the publisher, I'm the associate publisher, started the company, he always had the vision, which I shared, to really make this a major player. We're the independent publisher of big ambitions and aggressive dreams. As Scott said, we're publishing 120 books a year now. We do a general mix of fiction and nonfiction. We have a crime imprint. We really want to publish books that we think are important editorially, and strive for the highest possible goals in terms of review coverage, publicity, marketing, advertising. We really want to make every book that we do successful as an independent. As I'm sure we can all relate, we can't kind of afford to have books that are shunned to the wayside. Every book that we put on our list, we want to make successful on its own terms. And I think the digital frontier has been really exciting for Pegusus. I mean, our first book came off the press April 2006, and I think the ebook thing started not soon thereafter. So it's been exciting to kind of grow the company as ebooks have grown with us. And I think our greatest asset as an independent has been our flexibility. Just when you kind of think you know everything, our first ebook bestseller was not a crime novel or literary fiction. It was a very meaty history book about the Norman Conquest. So just when you kind of think you know everything, there's always something new to learn. And, it's nice to have the freedom of being an independent. We don't have to, kind of kowtow to kind of a shareholder's editorial sensibility that's asking for a werewolf steampunk book that has puppies in it, although somebody has that CD after the panel. But, we can kind of publish books that we think are important, that we think we can do well. I think the company's out in its 7th year, we realize what we can launch successfully, whether it's history or popular science or high quality crime fiction or literary fiction. We can do that very well. We're not branching out into YA or romance categories. That's just not something that plays into our kind of staff's strengths. But the digital frontier is really exciting. We've hired a digital marketing manager and are growing our personnel slowly, steadily, but surely, and it should be exciting.
That's terrific. A digital marketing manager. What is the first push? Digital marketing manager, or are you still in talks?
No, so she's been with us since August, and we just launched our week's Crime Queen, Camilla Lackford. Her 5th book came out May 5th, so we've launched a really aggressive digital ad campaign, trying to make sure that, on the launch date, all the digital ads in the Times or NPR or BookBub or Bookslut are all kind of hitting at the same time. So if someone is online that day, which is everybody, and for some reason that particular link is everywhere. Across social media, it's on Facebook, and obviously that's difficult to maintain for weeks and weeks and weeks, but to try and have some of the expertise to coordinate it for that launch date when the reviews are hitting is something that's really new and exciting, and kind of a new way to manipulate ads.
That's fantastic. I like the kind of fire that you can produce on the launch, because we tend to sometimes say in digital, well, there isn't a launch anymore, we just push it out there and the long tail takes over, but it's nice to get the frisson of something that's just started off and get everybody excited. And I like your blitz approach.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Yeah, it's rare. Thank you. Bronwyn Ruska from Soho Press. I'm so intrigued because this is a family-founded press. Talk to us about it, Bronwyn.
It is. First, I want to say that I am a huge fan of Pegusus books. Pegusus is actually my publisher for my novel that came out a year and a half ago. So this is my editor right here, which is very
And this was not planned. I didn't even know I said it.
I know. Anyway, so I love Pegusus, but Soho is sort of in a similar vein. It was started in 1986 by my mother, Laura Ruska, and Yuri Urevix, who is sort of a longtime editor at Dial Press and a lot of other places. And at that time, they were with my father and Lori Colwyn, who was Yuri's wife. They were in a bar in Soho, just bemoaning the state of publishing, and there's so many great books out there, and big houses just aren't willing to take a chance right now, which sounds awfully familiar because it's exactly what's happening again, or still, I'm not sure. And so they decided to start Soho. And by the way, Soho the idea of it was conceived in a bar in Soho, but we had never actually been in Soho. We've been in Union Square.
Off the church itself.
So,
More misleading brand.
It started with literary fiction, and it's something that we've done from the beginning. A few years later, I was not in the picture at that point, but they decided to branch out to something that was a little bit new at the time, exotic crime fiction, mysteries and thrillers set in other countries, merging this love of sort of other cultures and how they work with the genre that my mother was incredibly just loved and read everything from the time she was like 8 years old. She was reading Agatha Christie, and she's read it all. And that actually, Soho Crime has actually become Soho's most well-known imprint. And because people who discover it realize that they're going to like just about every other series. One series they discover that they're going to like just about every other series that we do because it's all in the same kind of wheelhouse. And then last year, we launched a young adult mystery and thriller imprint called Soho Teen, which is a completely different landscape. I mean, there's been a learning curve, of course, because, how do you market to teens? And you realize that, well, you actually do exactly what you do for adults, and then also this whole additional thing of reaching teens and school librarians and academic marketing. And so it's been really, really fun, and just realizing what a big sort of crossover market there really is. And it's just the challenge of sort of finding those people, and always hard to build a new brand, but it's always a fun moment when you have to sort of figure out that kind of stuff. So I came up to Soho in 2008, and in 2010 I became publisher, and we've been growing steadily since then. We now do about 90 books a year. We've doubled our staff. We've more than doubled our staff since 2010. And our sales and revenue, and it's just been a really, really exciting moment for us. And it's really, and it's still the thing that drives us is finding those voices that other people haven't discovered yet, that are of this certain quality and that hit all the right notes for what we're trying to be in a Soho.
And does that drive go across all the sectors, so Soho Teen, Soho Crime, everything? You're always trying to find a new voice?
The new voice, is that what you're saying? Yeah, I mean, not necessarily only debuts. I mean, we do a lot of debuts, and I love debut authors. A lot of times we get mid-list authors who have a difficult track to overcome, so that's something that we've become, pretty good at, and have some interesting ways of trying to attack, because that's one of the hardest things, and I think that's why a lot of these amazing authors, like Alex Shakar, for example, who did a book a few years ago for us called Luminarium on our literary side. He's one of the finest writers around these days, and he had some very bad luck with his book coming out a few days after 9/11, and no one wanted to buy a book about, a parody of consumer culture. It just had no interest for anybody at the moment. So he has this difficult track, and when he went out to sell his second book 10 years later, everyone looked at that track and said, I don't think we can, no. And so there we were with this guy with this amazing book and this track. So that's the kind of stuff that we really like to do.
That's fantastic. It's great. You notice the diversity of these companies. They're so different in terms of their ethos, in terms of how they handle each other, in terms of how they think of themselves and what they're doing. The next thing I want to talk to you guys about is knowing now something about how each of you are trying to approach the business. What makes it harder than it should be? What's your biggest stumbling block, Jason? What's the toughest thing you're up against?
Well, with a nod of respect to the two women at the end of the table, fiction is extremely difficult. And
yes.
I have,
because at Font Catalog, they're producing books that actually maybe come back with some of their earlier pieces. It's nonfiction.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, one of the things that's just wonderful about working with a book division of a website that has 35 million readers a month is that you learn a lot about what people care about and what they want to share, and what time of day they read, and what article they read before and what article they read after, and where they came from to get there and where they go next. All of that sort of gives you a nice composite picture of what book they might be interested in. So the data is great when you think about trying to drop in a book on dating, or a book on sort of self-improvement, or a humorous memoir, or something about pets. These things are sort of not easy, but easier. But it's extremely difficult to figure out what work of fiction one might want to read if he or she enjoyed an article on the 17 things you forgot to thank your mother for. You can guess, but the subjectivity of fiction and the fact that we choose novels using very different calculus than we do when we choose a memoir or a dating advice book. So it's extremely difficult because we have somewhat, not totally eschewed, but not spent a lot of time worrying about who's going to review our books, or if a traditional book channel cares about our books, because we have a large audience and we know them well and they return to us often. So we feel like we can introduce something to them that we would think that they would like. But those more traditional venues of the reviews and more traditional players are what really persuade people to read fiction. And so for that is a mystery for us that we would like to try to find a way to solve. We also don't do a lot of verticalization in the thought catalog. It's very sort of non-hierarchical. There's not a observable taxonomy from a consumer perspective. There's one behind the scenes, but it's not sports catalog or politics catalog. It's thought catalog. It's this sort of open forum stream for people to share their experience right now. And, so without that verticalization, it's even further difficult to sort of build a kind of bookish quality. And in some ways I really like that we're sort of taking the book out of the channel where you would normally find it, and we're dropping it into a viral article where you wouldn't think of a book living. And that's really exciting. But it does make some of the more traditional sales mechanisms a little bit harder to achieve.
And you're taking some steps. I mean, Richard Nash's The Business of Literature, a long essay that a lot of us have a lot of respect for, that I think first appeared in VQR, Virginia Quarterly, has now been published as a book by Thought Catalog. And this is not within the realm of what we're normally seeing in that catalog.
That's a very good point. You know, in our talks with agents and sort of revealing to them the data and our sales and sort of how we're selling things, we bought a series of books this spring that will be out in the summer and this fall that aren't that sort of dating guide, here's why you're not married sort of vibe. They're much more serious, much more thoughtful, they're much more byliner, Adamist-esque. And we feel like we have really good ideas and a really good plan for how to push those in, but they still have some proximity to the thing we know how to do. And we would really love to publish fiction and to publish it extremely well. So we're going to be borrowing the strategies of Pegusus and Soho, maybe taking to the lunch a few times.
This is great. Scott, what do you find you're up against if there's something that drives you crazy?
I mean, this is interesting. I mean, if your audience, Jason, really needs our books, and our books continue to need greater distribution. I mean, I think what's interesting to me right now is the imbalance of distribution, the disproportionate amount of titles being sold on Amazon, and the need for a wider distribution network. I think places like Thought Catalog, where you have an audience, where you have data from readers, is pretty interesting. What it really needs is the kinds of books that those people want to read. And I think so what we're thinking about a lot more is direct to consumer. We're looking at different kinds of arrangements with sites that we've been building where we can get our books to audiences. And this doesn't mean off diversionbooks.com, and it doesn't mean only off the retailers. It means going out to engaged readers who would stumble upon or be recommended to one of our books. And we've seen dramatic results in some of these offers and arrangements that we have with websites where everybody wins. As a publisher, we're getting direct to consumer. So we're getting information about readers. We're getting marketing, so even if that book doesn't get sold on that site, maybe they'll go back and find it on Amazon. The site's getting fresh content. They're possibly getting a piece of the action. So our biggest challenge and yet our biggest opportunity is increased distribution. And I find that to be a really interesting thing to look at right now. So a company like Thought Catalog that has that built-in audience, that's an interesting thing.
I'll just echo that for a second and say we have investigated and searched and thought about for the better part of this year, the end of last year, as to how to and when to trigger direct sales mechanisms. And we just haven't yet felt like there was a mechanism that we thought we could trust to make that work well. So we should talk.
Yeah, let's talk. We got a little deal going here. That's good. Jessica, talk to us.
This is, I guess, kind of analogous of what Scott and Jason were both talking about, but I think our biggest challenge that we found in a very kind of meta sense is there's a lot of noise out there. Not just lots of books, but the traditional venues that would have a big impact for any kind of book, like a booking on Good Morning America or the Today Show or a big review in the New York Times. 10 years ago, you would see immediately like 10,000 copies in my leaf warehouse. But now, there's just so many other distractions out there, whether it's popular culture, or movies, or nobody watches regular television anymore. They're all busy streaming Game of Thrones. It's been an issue for us how to continue to pursue the kind of big traditional outlets to help launch our books and get attention for them, but then also kind of pursuing more direct-to-consumer channels, you know, being very specific and kind of niche and trying to find out who's reading what kind of books would interest them. So, for example, I'll use Broadway as an example, you know, we were pursuing the big reviews. You know, we got pieces in Over Magazine and everything else, but then we were also looking at, there was a heavy parenting and education angle in her novel. So let's go out and try and find these mommy bloggers and parenting blogs and education forums and you know, things on psychology today. Find a way to bring the novel to people that we hoped would actually be interested in reading it and purchasing it. So it's kind of, we're trying to find a way to balance and kind of cut through that noise about the Kardashian wedding or who knows what, who's distracting people from reading good books, but to get them to pay attention and really find the readers, you know, using digital channels, in addition to, of course, the traditional review and publicity platforms that are still important, but they don't have the same impact that they used to.
Exactly. Bronwyn, this makes sense to you, I think.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge, or one of there's so many, but one of the big ones is that things are changing so fast. So you figure, oh my God, I get it. I know how to do this. I'm going to do this every single time. And 5 minutes later, that doesn't work anymore. And it's just, you know, trying to constantly, you know, revamp what you're doing, what your strategies are. And you know, a few years ago, there was this huge growth in ebooks, and it was just, you know, sky's the limit. And I think, you know, everyone is seeing a real plateau in terms of ebook sales, even maybe a little bit of a downturn. And there's still a tremendous amount of our sales are through ebooks, and that's wonderful. But it's not that same sort of, you know, wow, it's going to go on forever feeling. And the idea that you can't just put all your eggs in one basket, and it's really important to maintain the relationships with all of our various retail partners, including Barnes & Noble and independents, including wholesalers. Libraries are really important. Coming here to BEA is really important, and just making sure that you're talking to real people in real bookstores who can help you to, you know, build your book and to create a life for your book. Because if you don't have the people on the ground in the bookstores and libraries loving the books and talking about them and recommending them and putting them on lists, and it's going to be much harder to sell enough books, physical and ebooks. I think it's, for us, it's definitely a huge part of what we do. Is the physical, like you physical
Librarians, I love you.
Yeah.
For any librarians in this audience, I think they've really, they build print books, they build ebooks too. Libraries have done a great job, I think, handling the digital revolution and keeping libraries relevant and even more relevant than ever.
Especially for fiction. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what you were talking about. How do you build life for a novel? And that's really hard, especially if there's no off the book page element. You know, like, oh, you know, attention deficit. That, you know, we could have this whole off the book page sort of nonfiction angle. But if you've just got a really awesome novel written by a really talented person, how do you get that noise heard amidst all that other noise? And so librarians are sort of the magic.
And Robin, you're echoing something that Bella Andre was saying. The authors are feeling that a constant change going on. But every time they think they've got a system to approach their own audiences, they don't have that system anymore. This thing isn't working, that approach isn't working, this one suddenly is working, that one suddenly isn't working. I think what fascinates me about these companies as well is author awareness. I mean, maybe Bella's here, I'm not sure. I hope that all of our authors can hear independent publishers like this speak, because again, this may be my perception, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think enough authors who are especially approaching this in the entrepreneurial way aren't thinking of independent publishers. Jason, do you think that authors are considering independent publishers, or are they looking at either a big five or a self-publishing approach? You have an interesting group because a lot of them probably don't think of themselves as book writers until you come to them and start talking to them, right? So your independent publishing outfit may be something they're not even aware of at the magazine.
Well, you know, this table's not that long, but it's pretty long. I mean, what's going on down there is so different than what's going on here.
Yeah.
Do independent authors think of Soho and Pegusus? Yeah. Do they think of diversion? Increasingly. Do they think of thought catalog? I don't know. And I think that the conversations we've been having this spring with agents and authors have surfaced that it doesn't take much to provide an agent or an author with a release valve for their cynicism about big publishing. Okay? That's not difficult. There's frustration and a ubiquitous sense of dismay and et cetera. So it's not hard to convince them that another path might be a better option for them, particularly with a bad track or sort of swimming in the Midwest for too long. But would they want to turn towards a new player, an upstart that didn't give them some of the emotional satisfaction that they got from a traditional publishing deal? I think that really just depends on the author.
Right.
If big publishers have a hard time with all of their scale and all of their weight persuading authors that they're worth it, and so the authors go it alone, independent publishers have, I think, even a more difficult case to make to persuade those independent authors to come into the fold. In our experience, telling them about our platform and about the reach we have and about the specific targeting that we're able to do is our persuasive argument, but Scott's would be different and Jessica's would be different. So I think it's about trying to leverage the particular set of virtues that your platform or publisher has and finding the authors who are most in need of that particular set of virtues and who most understand where it maps on top of their own career.
Right, that fit to their purpose. And I guess, Scott, how aware do you find authors are?
Well, I think it's interesting, and there's a variety of hybrid authors now. There's, it's not just self-published and traditional. Sometimes it's traditional and then indie, or it's indie and self-pub. And what I'm seeing is a lot of authors being flexible, and increasingly so over the last year. There's no magic formula to being a self-published authors. I think people realize that. And the traditional publishers don't do everything right, and don't necessarily require that many books. So I think that we're seeing authors with a variety of projects. They're coming to us with a series, and they might have a series, romance series with St. Martin's or someone else. And likewise, thriller writers have backlist with an old publisher and a new book with us, possibly. And so I think that what I love about it is that there isn't a singular mentality about what's right for an author. And I think Jason's absolutely right. It depends on what they're looking for, what their experience is so far. What's tried and worked, what have you tried and it hasn't worked. We'd like to try to satisfy as many things as we can for authors looking for value, as I said before, and looking for hopefully great production value, editorial help, marketing team that's in sync, efficient, a wide distribution, and I don't know if I said high royalties, but that's a big part of it too. So there's a lot of willingness to partner out there from the author community. I think it's going to be more and more over time.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Jessica?
I agree with what Jason said. Every case is different. Every book is unique. Every author has different goals and visions and what they're willing to commit to in terms of time, in terms of what they're looking for financially. That's often the elephant in the room. Obviously the big five can offer advances and financial incentives that perhaps, at least in my Pegusus experience, a lot of times we are not able to compete at a certain level. But on the flip side, we can offer a wide variety of other things that perhaps the big five cannot. So again, it's just a matter of finding the right fit. I think that's kind of a term that gets bandied around a lot, but it is absolutely appropriate. Different authors are looking for different things. Some want to kind of just hand the project to someone and watch the publisher shoot it out the other end, all beautiful and wrapped up in a nice bow. Other authors want to be more involved. For me at Pegusus, I always tell my authors when I chat with them on the phone that I'm going to work them pretty hard. I'm going to attest to this, but I want their feedback. I want their help with calling and their connections and their favors and getting creative with different ideas and to be involved in the editorial process. So, if that's what they're looking for, that would be the experience that we strive to give them. But I think, we do a lot of work with authors who have been, again, swimming in the mid-list with their bigger houses, and we can give them, more attention, really try and work with them to kind of get their book to the next level. And sometimes the amount of copies that they sold for their first book and they got dropped would be actually really exciting for someone like us, and we'd be able to give them a new launch and work with their sales track very effectively. So I think, and we have, as Scott said too, we have some authors that have a backlist in a totally different genre that they're self-publishing or doing with an ebook only division. We'll do their new book in a different genre, the traditional way. So I think, flexibility is kind of the name of the game these days.
Bronwyn, how hard did Jessica work you?
It was great. It was really the most fun I've ever had. Because,
That's good.
As a publisher, you get to actually look inside the brain of another publisher and see how they do things. And I think we had sort of an unusual experience like that. It was really positive, and I think, it was successful. It was good.
That's true.
One thing that always is disturbing to me is when I talk to writers who have a book and okay, everyone just wants to go get the huge advance, obviously. I mean, you want to go to a fan house and you want to get that $200,000 advance. I mean, everyone imagines when they start their book that's what's going to happen. And that, happens to a handful of people if they're lucky. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to, have a wonderful career, because if you don't earn out that advance, you're not really welcome back afterwards. So there's pluses and minuses to things like that. Of course, agents always want to get the big advance because money up front is money that you might not earn on the other side. But if you come, if you're at Soho and you're going to offer a more modest advance to a debut author that you really believe in, put a whole bunch of energy and that money that you didn't put up front into their marketing and publicity and make that a beautiful book, you can reap a whole lot of returns on the other end. So it's a matter of just having a little bit of patience and trust, and we've seen that happen time and again. It's just an incredibly satisfying feeling to be able to do that for an author. And I don't think that is something that, especially for novelists, especially for first-time novelists, a lot of people who really haven't been in publishing before think, okay, I'm not going to get the huge advance, I'm going to go do it by myself, and I'll get 70% of all of my, royalties. And 70% of zero is not a lot of money. So it's just, if you don't have that infrastructure to publish your first novel, right? It's just, it kind of breaks my heart to see people sort of think that they can do this one thing because it's being presented as this easy answer, and not understand that there's so much that actually goes into publishing a book well, especially that kind of book.
It must take something of an educational process, though, to get this across to some authors who may not understand the value in working the way you're working and the patience it's going to take to see the response on the other end if they just don't get the big bang right from the beginning, right?
Yeah.
One of my pet peeves is when people think that no work goes into creating an ebook, that it should be free because you didn't make anything, which is not true, because that's intellectual property. That's what the words you're reading. But as Scott said, you got to create a quality digital product. Nobody wants to read ebook that is filled with mistakes, or that doesn't flow right, or you can't search, or has a cheesy looking cover, or doesn't download properly. That is something we do as publishers, whether it's ebook only or whatever. It's not free. There is work and labor and skill involved. So I think that's something authors forget too.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of education to be done. We have time for one more question. I want to run it past you guys quickly because I think it's something we're all thinking about today here. How in touch with readers do you feel your operation is? Jason, again, you're in rather an unusual position because many of your authors are coming from the readership. Does the wider readership follow them and buy the books? Yes.
Yes.
That's good. And you have an automatic contact there, right?
Yes. This has been an interesting thing to track over the past year in particular, probably since last June or July. Sort of watching a particular subset of our authors who are regular writers for the site, They have well-built-out author pages. They're producing a lot of content, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 articles a week. Really feeding their readers what the readers want to read. And just watching their numbers climb, both in terms of monthly readership. We have a few authors now who get, numerous of them get upward of 5, 6 million reads a month of their content. And it's regularly the same core set of readers who are coming there first, entering through the author page, sharing it, getting excited about it. We don't consider ourselves a print publisher, although we've done print on occasion, but every time we've done print, it's because of the overwhelming response of the readers of this particular book, who by the hundreds have written and requested it, and then by the hundreds buy it. When we feed the links through to Amazon or Barnes & Noble, we always feed through the ebook, and it's remarkable to watch how many people click through to the ebook and then decide to order the print book instead. And that only happens with that core set of writers who have really, over the period of a year, writing 5 or 6 times a week, really developed the core group of readers. So that's been exciting to see sort of those little tribes emerging. And then as for, getting to know the wider readership, it's actually been fascinating to watch it shift. So you introduced Thought Catalog as sort of, catering somewhat specifically to millennials, which one would think would be true if you looked at our homepage or the most viral pieces, but in fact, almost an equal subset of our readers are moms in their late 30s or 40s. They're almost equal now when we watch them pass through. So that's interesting too when we determine what books to publish. There is a quality of our publishing program that is reading the data and publishing to the reader's desires. Right. It's not total. We're not, complete whores for the public, but there is a sense in which we're producing, to a great degree, what they've already told us through their taste they want to read.
Exactly, which is terrific. And Scott, you're very much in touch with your readership through direct sales and things.
We're excited about direct-to-consumer. One of the very first books we published was a business book where the author brought a major audience. And I thought, we have to sell this direct. This makes no sense to just pass this over to the retailers and get zero data. So we did that. We had an enormous response. We had a tremendous amount of consumers that bought it. We now have their email addresses. And one of the things that's exciting, and Jason's alluding to here, is the idea of reoffering to these readers. So we've created separate reading lists of different verticals, different categories, if you will, of books that are bought by these people, and they opt in. They have to opt into to getting an email of a new book, maybe in that genre. And so now we're able to go back out to those readers, and we're seeing great conversion on that as well. Really high percentages of readers that are coming back and reading another book by one of our authors in the same genre. So the possibilities around direct-to-consumer are tremendous. I mean, that's why Amazon does not share any reader data. They keep it all to themselves, as does every other retailer. I don't mean to single them out, but as we build this distribution network over time, and we're able to get this direct engagement with readers who want certain kinds of books, it's a tremendous opportunity, and we're going to keep pushing in that direction very hard.
Fantastic. Jessica?
Yes, we're always tracking, what books do well when certain things hit, targeting different audiences, whether we spike up or down, depending on certain media hits. And we actually take reader feedback. We got a letter from rabid James Bond fans after we published 2 Bond backlist books saying that you guys should really publish the John Gardner backlist. And we did. And it was, so it was a great way. Claiborne and I, we read a lot, but I'm not, by any means a Bond scholar, but there's a whole community of people out there. And so it was actually great to kind of take their advice and investigate this one writer. So it's one example, but, we do kind of take reader feedback if they take the time to track us down.
Fantastic. Brown, before we go, do you have another comment on this?
Yeah, we take it very seriously. I think as an independent press, we're able to have a personality and personalities on our staff. And we have crime newsletters that go out once a month, and our crime editor writes them and does contests and sends them out to readers and booksellers and librarians, and gets a lot of conversations going that way. We just revamped our website twice in the last year and a half, so that we have direct sales capability. We're selling ebooks directly. We have some crime clubs, a subscription. Soon we're going to be able to do physical direct sales as well, which is really exciting. And just because of the brand of Soho Crime especially, we do have people who really come back, keep coming back. And we have other, other sort of on-the-ground ways that we connect readers as well. Some grassroots kind of marketing things with booksellers, where if we run contests through stores, and we can collect people's addresses and emails as they apply for the contest, and then we can keep in touch with them when the next book comes out in the first series, that kind of thing. I think it is incredibly important to know who your readers are and keep in touch with them.
And it sounds to me like you're doing a good job of creating verticals. You're niching a lot of this material so that you know where they are and how to get to them.
Yeah.
Great. Listen, thank you all very much. We're out of
Thank
time.
you.
I wish we had longer. Thank you very much.